My wife methodically sabotaged my career and even faked a miscarriage to keep me trapped. But when I started digging, I discovered that for 3 generations, the women in her family had built their fortune by systematically ruining the lives of men. You ever had someone systematically dismantle your life, piece by piece, right under your nose? Someone you loved, trusted, swore to spend forever with? I did. And the woman who did it? My wife. This isn't just about a bad breakup or a bad job. It's a story of calculated destruction, a shocking betrayal, and how I fought back from the absolute brink to expose a generational darkness. I'm a software developer, or at least I was. I've always been the quiet type, you know? The guy who prefers debugging code to team happy hours. Social anxiety is a bitch, but I was managing it fine. Then I met Demi. God, I was such an idiot. Here was this gorgeous, sharp marketing exec, showing genuine interest in me at a tech conference. I actually thought I'd somehow crack the code to dating. We got married after a year, and honestly, the first 2 years, they were great. Then the nightmare began. The HR complaints started rolling in at my startup. Anonymous reports, saying I'd made inappropriate comments during code reviews. What the hell? I barely speak during meetings unless it's about the actual code. My brain was just short-circuiting. Demi, though, she was amazing about it. She held me while I had panic attacks, told me we'd work through it together, even helped me practice normal human interactions. Sweet, right? But then more complaints kept coming. Apparently, my body language was aggressive, and I made female coworkers uncomfortable just by existing. My manager put me on a PIP, a performance improvement plan, and basically froze me out of all team projects. Demi became my lifeline. She'd come home from work and listen to me spiral for hours. We even started trying for a baby because why not add more stress to the situation? Then boom, fired. The final complaint was about me creating a hostile work environment. No examples, no specifics, just vibes, apparently. Demi suggested we move cities for a fresh start. She'd support us while I found something new. I landed a job at a bigger company 3 months later. More structure, less required social interaction. Perfect for someone like me. That same week, Demi tells me she's pregnant. Finally, something good happening. I put my head down and focused on not screwing up again. But 3 months in, guess what? Anonymous complaints start rolling in. Same exact pattern. Same vague accusations. My brain broke at that point. I started questioning every interaction, every email, every line of code review. I developed agoraphobia and couldn't leave the apartment without Demi. Then she miscarried. Said it was stress from my work situation. I completely shut down after that. Got fired from job number 2 and didn't even try to defend myself. Demi became the breadwinner while I rotted on the couch. She handled literally everything. Bills, groceries, scheduling my therapy appointments. I ghosted my family and friends because how do you explain failing twice at the only thing you're good at? Then Lincoln called last week. Lincoln worked at my first startup job. He'd moved into IT security and was investigating some weird patterns in the old complaint system. Turns out, every single anonymous complaint against me came from my own IP address. He checked with a buddy at my second company. Same thing. The complaints were coming from inside the house. Literally. My hands were shaking so bad I could barely hold the phone. Then I remembered. Demi's ex. He tried to warn me when we first started dating. He said she was controlling and liked to be in charge of everything. I laughed it off because, you know, bitter ex, right? But now, I decided to dig deeper. I found that Demi had worked in HR when she first started at her job. She knew exactly what buttons to push, what phrases would make HR take notice. I tore the apartment apart while she was at work. Hidden behind some marketing books, I found her journal. This woman had a 5-year plan written out to make me completely dependent on her. She'd researched benzos and antipsychotics and figured out exact dosages to make me seem unstable without actually killing me. There were drafts of power of attorney documents. And holy shit, she'd taken out 3 life insurance policies on me. But the worst part of it all? The truth about the baby. The miscarriage was a lie. She straight up lied about being pregnant to guilt me into staying. When she came home early and caught me with the journal, she didn't even pretend to be sorry. She just smiled and said I needed her protection, that the world was too cruel for someone like me. Then she dropped the bomb. She was actually pregnant this time. I told her I didn't believe her and tried to leave, but she called 911 claiming I was having a psychotic episode. When the cops showed up, I looked exactly how she described. Manic, paranoid, ranting about conspiracies. They threw me in a 72-hour hold while Demi played the concerned wife. Oscar-worthy performance, really. Now I'm back home, and she controls my meds. I planned to just leave, but she showed me a positive pregnancy test. I knew, in my gut, I couldn't just leave my child. But in order to stay, I had to play by her rules. I palmed the pills when she wasn't looking. Then I read more of her journals. I discovered her mother did the same thing to her father. It's some sick generational cycle, but it ends with me. I've been documenting everything, backing it up to multiple cloud services she doesn't know about. Tomorrow, I'm meeting with someone who can help. Someone who believes me because they've been through it too. Her ex wasn't just bitter. Turns out he was victim zero, and he's been waiting for another survivor to compare notes with. Demi's sleeping next to me right now, probably dreaming about our future where I'm drooling in a psych ward while she raises our kid to be just like her. She has no idea that her perfectly controlled husband has been planning his own little project. The hunter is about to become the hunted. I woke up the next morning to find Demi watching me. Not in a loving way, but studying me like I was some lab experiment. She smiled when she saw my eyes open and handed me my morning pills with a glass of water. I took them, making sure to tuck them under my tongue while she watched. After she left for work, I spit them out and flushed them down the toilet, like I'd been doing for the past week. My hands trembled as I pulled out the backup phone I'd hidden inside an old computer tower in the closet. Lincoln had given it to me during our secret meeting at the library. The screen lit up with dozens of screenshots, recordings, and photos of Demi's journal pages. Everything I needed to prove what she'd done to me. I just had to be careful. One wrong move, and she'd have me committed for real this time. I heard footsteps in the hallway and quickly shoved the phone back into its hiding spot, but it was just our upstairs neighbor heading to work. My heart was pounding so hard I thought it might burst. This constant paranoia was exhausting, but I couldn't afford to slip up now. Not when I was so close to exposing her. That afternoon, I met with Demi's ex, Mike, at a coffee shop across town. He looked terrible, with dark circles under his eyes and hands that shook worse than mine. We sat in the back corner where no one could overhear us. He pulled out a folder, thick with documents, and slid it across the table. She did the same thing to me, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. Started with the HR complaints at my job, then the medication, then the pregnancy scare to keep me trapped. He showed me emails, text messages, even recordings he'd managed to capture before she destroyed his life completely. I tried to warn you, man, but she's good at making people think you're crazy. I flipped through the papers, seeing my own story reflected in his. The patterns were identical. The same phrases in the HR complaints, the same medications prescribed by doctors she'd recommended, even the same life insurance policies. My stomach churned as I realized how calculated this all was. How did you get away? I asked. Mike laughed bitterly. I didn't. She let me go when she found you. Guess I wasn't fun to play with anymore once I was completely broken. He leaned forward, his eyes intense. But together, we might have enough evidence to stop her, to make sure she can't do this to anyone else. We spent the next hour comparing notes and building our case. Lincoln had agreed to testify about the IP addresses. Mike had his documentation. I had the journal entries and recordings. It wasn't bulletproof, but it was something. We agreed to meet again in 3 days to finalize our plan. When I got home, Demi was already there. My blood ran cold. She never came home early. She was sitting on the couch, my backup phone in her hand, scrolling through all my evidence. The computer tower lay in pieces on the floor. She looked up at me with that same calm smile that made my skin crawl. "Oh, honey," she said, her voice dripping with fake concern. "I came home to surprise you with lunch and found you'd torn apart your old computer. You must have had another episode. Look at all these paranoid delusions you've been creating." She held up the phone, showing me my own screenshots, doctored images, fake recordings, conspiracy theories about me. This is worse than I thought. I stood frozen in the doorway, my mind racing. She'd found everything. All my evidence. All my proof. She stood up and walked toward me, still holding the phone. "I've already called Dr. Peterson. He agrees that we need to adjust your medication. Maybe even consider inpatient treatment for your own safety." "Of course. You can't do this," I said, backing away from her. "People know the truth now. Mike, Lincoln, they'll tell everyone what you've done." She laughed. Actually laughed. "Mike, the man who's been stalking me since our breakup, who's been institutionalized twice for paranoid delusions. And Lincoln, who was fired from his IT job for hacking into company systems. Really, honey, you need better witnesses than that." My heart sank as I realized she'd planned for this too. Of course she had dirt on both of them. Of course she'd made sure any potential allies would be discredited before they could help me. She was always 3 steps ahead. "I've already filed the paperwork," she continued, pulling out a stack of documents from her purse. "A restraining order against you for my safety and the baby's safety. The bruises on my arms from when you grabbed me last week really helped sell it to the judge." She rolled up her sleeve to show purple marks I'd never made. Amazing what you can do with a little makeup and some acting skills. I felt the walls closing in. She'd trapped me again. But this time was different. This time she was cutting me off from any chance of escape. The restraining order meant I couldn't go near her, couldn't even try to defend myself without looking like the dangerous stalker she'd painted me as. You have 1 hour to pack your things and leave, she said, checking her watch. After that, I called the police. And trust me, they've already been briefed on your unstable behavior. One wrong move, and you'll be spending the next few months in a psychiatric hold. I stumbled to our bedroom and threw clothes into a bag, my mind reeling. How had she known? How had she found the phone? Then I remembered the new security system she'd insisted on installing last month. Cameras in every room, all accessible from her phone. She'd been watching me this whole time, letting me think I was building a case against her while she built an even stronger one against me. As I packed, I heard her on the phone with someone. Yes, officer, he's packing now. No, I don't feel safe, but I'm trying to handle this calmly. Yes, I have the restraining order right here. Thank you so much for being on standby. Every word was perfectly calculated to make her seem like the reasonable victim. I grabbed my bag and headed for the door, but she stopped me one last time. Oh, and honey, don't even think about trying to contact me or share your little conspiracy theories with anyone. I've already sent emails to your family, your former coworkers, everyone in your contact list explaining your mental health crisis. They're all very concerned and have promised to alert me if you reach out to them. The full scope of her plan hit me like a physical blow. She'd isolated me completely, cut me off from everyone who might believe me or help me. Even if I tried to tell my story now, I'd look exactly like the delusional, dangerous ex-husband she'd portrayed me as. Every move I made to defend myself would only prove her point. I left the apartment in a daze, with nowhere to go and no one to turn to. I sat in my car in a parking lot, staring at my phone. Every contact in my list was now a potential trap. If I reached out to anyone, they'd report back to her. If I tried to see her, I'd be arrested. If I posted anything online, it would be used as evidence of my instability. But then I remembered something: the cloud backups. I'd uploaded everything to multiple services she didn't know about. The evidence was still out there, scattered across different accounts. She might have found one phone, but she hadn't found everything. I still had a chance. But I had to be smarter this time. I had to play the long game. I drove to a cheap motel on the outskirts of town and paid cash for a room. No credit cards, nothing she could trace. Then I bought a new laptop from a pawn shop and started rebuilding my evidence cache. Every document, every recording, every piece of proof I'd gathered was still there in the cloud, waiting for me. Over the next few days, I worked quietly, methodically. I reached out to Mike through encrypted channels, letting him know what had happened. He wasn't surprised. She did the same thing to me, he said, but you're smarter than I was. You kept backups. We started coordinating again, but this time we were more careful. No meetings in public, no phone calls, everything through secure channels she couldn't monitor. Lincoln came through with something unexpected. While investigating the IP addresses, he'd found something else. Demi had been doing this for years, not just to me and Mike. There were at least 3 other men who'd been through her system. All of them had lost their jobs, their sanity, their lives to her manipulation. But they were all too broken or scared to come forward. We need to find them, I told Lincoln through our encrypted chat. If we can get them to share their stories, we might have enough to expose her pattern. But finding them would be tricky. Demi had done a thorough job of discrediting each of them. They were scattered across the country, some in institutions, some homeless, all marked as unreliable witnesses. Meanwhile, Demi was playing the perfect victim on social media. Posts about staying strong for the baby, about surviving domestic abuse, about the importance of mental health awareness. Our mutual friends rallied around her, offering support and condemning me without ever hearing my side. She even started a blog about her experience, gaining thousands of followers who praised her bravery. I watched it all from my motel room, documenting everything. Every lie she told, every manipulation she posted, every false claim she made. I was building a counter-narrative, but I had to be patient. One wrong move, and I'd be arrested or institutionalized. The restraining order was like a sword hanging over my head. Then Mike found something that changed everything. Hidden in the documents from his own case, he discovered that Demi's mother had done the exact same thing to multiple men before settling on Demi's father. It was a learned behavior, passed down from mother to daughter like some twisted family tradition. And there were court records, sealed, but not destroyed, that showed the pattern going back even further. Her grandmother did it too, Mike told me during one of our encrypted calls. 3 generations of women destroying men's lives for control and money. But here's the thing, he said, there's a paper trail. Old court documents, medical records, insurance payouts. If we can connect all the dots, we can show this isn't just about you or me. It's a family business. We spent weeks gathering information, reaching out carefully to other victims, building our case piece by piece. Some of the men wouldn't talk, too traumatized or scared, but others were eager to finally have someone believe them. Their stories were heartbreakingly similar to mine. The HR complaints, the medication, the pregnancy scares, the restraining orders. Demi had perfected her mother's playbook. During this time, I had to watch from afar as Demi continued her performance. She posted ultrasound photos, baby shower plans, messages about being a strong single mother, all while I knew the pregnancy might be another lie, another manipulation to gain sympathy and control. But I couldn't do anything about it without violating the restraining order. Then one of Demi's other victims, a man named James, gave us the breakthrough we needed. He'd managed to record conversations with Demi from years ago where she explicitly talked about her plans, not just vague threats or implications, but detailed discussions of how she would destroy his life. He'd kept them hidden for years, too scared to use them, but now, with others backing him up, he was ready to come forward. We had to be strategic about how to release the information. Going to the police was risky. Demi had already poisoned that well. Going public too early would just make us look like a group of bitter exes. We needed someone with credibility, someone who couldn't be dismissed as delusional or vindictive. That's when Lincoln suggested something brilliant. His cousin was an investigative journalist who specialized in exposing systematic abuse. She'd won awards for her work uncovering corruption and manipulation. If we could get her interested in the story, she had the resources and credibility to dig deeper than we ever could. I was hesitant at first. Journalists meant exposure, and exposure meant risk. But Mike convinced me it was our best shot. We can't fight her in the shadows forever, he said. Eventually, we need someone to shine a light on what she's doing. We compiled everything we had into a comprehensive package. The recordings, the documents, the patterns across multiple victims, the generational history. It told a story not just of one manipulative woman, but of a systematic approach to destroying lives that had been refined over decades. Then we sent it to Lincoln's cousin, Sarah, and waited. Sarah was intrigued, but cautious. She wanted to meet with us, verify our claims, check our evidence. But meeting in person was dangerous for me. The restraining order meant I couldn't be anywhere Demi might be, and she had eyes everywhere. We had to get creative. We arranged to meet Sarah at a truck stop diner 2 hours outside the city. Lincoln drove me there in a borrowed car, checking mirrors constantly for anyone following us. Mike joined us via video call on a burner phone, too paranoid to meet in person after what Demi had done to him. Sarah arrived looking skeptical but professional, her recorder and notepad ready. The conversation lasted 3 hours. Sarah grilled us on every detail, cross-referencing dates, checking documents, verifying recordings. She was thorough in a way that gave me hope. When James' recordings played through the diner's tiny speakers, her expression shifted from skepticism to genuine concern. Demi's voice, calm and calculating, explained exactly how she would destroy James' career, isolate him from support, and make him completely dependent on her. This is systematic abuse, Sarah said quietly, reviewing her notes. But I need more. These recordings are damning, but they're old. I need current evidence, something that shows she's still doing this. She looked directly at me. The restraining order complicates things. I can't use you as a source if there's any chance it could be seen as violating it. My heart sank. Of course Demi had thought of this too. The restraining order didn't just keep me away from her, it discredited me as a witness. Any attempt to tell my story could be twisted into harassment, stalking, or violation of a court order. Sarah must have seen my despair because she leaned forward. But there might be another way, she said. I can investigate independently, interview people around her, look into public records, build the story without your direct involvement. It'll take longer, but it's safer for everyone. We agreed to her plan. Sarah would dig into Demi's past, interview coworkers, check financial records, anything that could corroborate our claims without putting us at risk. Lincoln would feed her technical data through secure channels. Mike and the other victims would provide historical context. I would stay in the shadows, documenting from afar. The next few weeks were torture. I moved from motel to motel, paying cash, staying off the grid. My savings were dwindling fast. I picked up freelance coding work under a fake name, building websites for small businesses that didn't ask questions. Every day, I checked Demi's social media, watching her craft her narrative of the brave, single mother escaping an abusive marriage. Her posts were masterful manipulations, photos of baby clothes with captions about new beginnings, inspirational quotes about surviving domestic violence, carefully staged shots of her looking thoughtful and strong. The comments poured in, hundreds of people offering support, condemning me without knowing the truth. Some were mutual friends who'd known me for years, now convinced I was a monster. Sarah's investigation progressed slowly. She interviewed Demi's coworkers, who all praised her professionalism and dedication. She talked to neighbors who described Demi as friendly and helpful. Every public-facing aspect of Demi's life was perfectly curated. But Sarah was patient, digging deeper, following paper trails that Demi couldn't control. Then Demi made her first mistake. She started dating again. His name was Ryan, a financial analyst she'd met at a conference. She posted photos of them together, careful to present it as a slow healing process after escaping abuse. But I recognized the pattern immediately. Ryan was quiet, introverted, worked in a field where reputation mattered. He was perfect prey. I wanted to warn him, but the restraining order made that impossible. Instead, I documented everything. The timeline of their relationship, the way she gradually appeared in more of his social media, how his posts became less frequent as hers increased. I sent it all to Sarah through Lincoln, hoping she could use it. Sarah was excited by this development. A current victim meant current evidence. She started following Ryan, interviewing his coworkers, building a profile of his life before and after Demi. The changes were subtle but consistent with the pattern. Ryan was becoming more isolated, his work performance starting to slip, his confidence visibly declining in photos. But Demi must have sensed something. Maybe Sarah had been too obvious in her questioning, or maybe Demi just had a sixth sense for threats to her control. Either way, she accelerated her timeline with Ryan. Within a month, they were engaged. The announcement post was perfectly crafted. How she'd found love again after trauma. How Ryan had shown her that good men existed. How their baby would have a father figure. The baby. That was another torture. Demi posted ultrasound photos, but I had no way to verify if they were real or stolen from the internet. She documented every doctor's visit, every milestone, building sympathy and support from her growing audience. If the pregnancy was real, my child was being used as a prop. If it was fake, the deception was even deeper than before. Mike cracked under the pressure. He called me one night, hammered and crying, saying he couldn't do this anymore. The investigation was bringing back too many memories, too much trauma. He was checking himself into a treatment facility, dropping out of our fight. I couldn't blame him. Demi had broken him years ago, and asking him to relive it was cruel. With Mike gone, James got cold feet. He stopped responding to messages, his phone disconnected. When Lincoln tried to track him down, he found that James had moved across the country, leaving no forwarding address. Another victim lost to fear and trauma. Our coalition was falling apart. Sarah hit roadblocks too. Demi's company wouldn't discuss her employment history, citing privacy concerns. The sealed court records from Demi's mother's cases required legal processes that would take months. Financial records showed nothing unusual. Demi was careful to keep everything legal, if unethical. The life insurance policies on me were real, but not illegal. Everything she did was just inside the law. I was running out of money and options. The motels were draining my savings, the freelance work barely covering food. I couldn't access my bank accounts without triggering location alerts that Demi might see. I couldn't get a real job without background checks that would reveal my location. The walls were closing in again. Then Lincoln made a discovery that changed everything. While reviewing the security footage from Demi's apartment building, footage he'd obtained through methods he wouldn't specify, he found something odd. The night before she discovered my backup phone, there was no footage of her coming home early. The timestamps showed her arriving at her usual time, but the internal apartment cameras showed her finding the phone hours earlier. She knew about the phone for hours before confronting you. Lincoln explained through our encrypted chat. She staged the whole discovery, probably after creating evidence to support her restraining order claim. This proves premeditation. It was a crack in her armor, but we needed more. Sarah suggested something risky, reaching out to Ryan directly. Not me, obviously, but someone else. Someone who could warn him without triggering Demi's suspicions. After much debate, we decided Sarah would approach him as part of her investigation into workplace relationships, something generic that wouldn't raise red flags. The meeting almost worked. Sarah met Ryan at his office, presenting herself as researching modern relationship dynamics in professional settings. He was friendly but guarded, clearly coached by Demi on what to say. But Sarah was skilled, gradually steering the conversation toward his relationship, his work-life balance, his recent changes. I've actually been having some issues at work, Ryan admitted eventually. Anonymous complaints about my communication style. It's strange because I've never had problems before. Sarah kept her expression neutral, but I could see her excitement in the notes she sent later. The pattern was starting again. We had him. We had current evidence of Demi's manipulation in action. Sarah scheduled a follow-up interview, planning to gradually reveal the pattern to warn Ryan before it was too late. But Demi moved faster than we anticipated. The next day, Ryan posted about taking a leave of absence from work to focus on his mental health and prepare for fatherhood. The post was clearly written by Demi. The language, the phrasing, even the emoji used matched her style perfectly. Ryan was already losing control of his own narrative. Sarah tried to reach him again, but his phone went straight to voicemail. His office said he was on indefinite leave. His social media went dark, except for posts that looked suspiciously like Demi's writing. We were watching her system work in real time, and we still couldn't stop it. I was desperate. My child, if they were real, would be born into this twisted system. Ryan would be destroyed like Mike, like James, like me. The cycle would continue. I had to do something. But every option seemed to lead to arrest or institutionalization. That's when the other victims started reaching out. Word had spread somehow. Maybe through Mike before he disappeared. Maybe through James' scattered warnings. Men from across the country, all with similar stories. Not all about Demi, but about her mother, her grandmother. The pattern went back generations, and the victims numbered in the dozens. One man, Sebastian, had kept meticulous records of Demi's grandmother's activities from the 1970s. Another, Alex, had documentation of Demi's mother's first victims from the 1990s. Piece by piece, we assembled a timeline of 3 generations of women systematically destroying men's lives for power and profit. Sarah was overwhelmed by the scope of the story. This wasn't just about one manipulative woman anymore. It was about an inherited pattern of abuse passed down like a family business. She needed more resources, more time, more protection. Her editor was getting nervous about potential lawsuits. Demi had deep pockets and good lawyers. We were so focused on the historical pattern that we almost missed the current danger. Lincoln's monitoring caught it first. Demi was preparing to move. She'd listed the apartment, transferred her job to remote work, and was making plans to relocate across the country with Ryan. If she disappeared, we'd lose any chance of exposing her. But the restraining order still bound me. I couldn't get within 500 feet of her, couldn't contact her directly or indirectly. Every move I made risked arrest. Sarah was hitting legal walls. The other victims were too scared or broken to go public. We had all this evidence and no way to use it. Then Demi made her second mistake. She got greedy. The life insurance policies on me weren't enough. She took out new ones on Ryan. Big ones. The kind that require medical exams and extensive paperwork. The kind that leave paper trails even she couldn't control. Sarah's investigation into the insurance companies revealed something shocking. Over the past 15 years, Demi had collected on 2 life insurance policies from men who died in accidents after leaving her. Both had been ruled suicides. Both had been heavily medicated. Both had left behind notes that seemed suspiciously coherent for men supposedly in mental crisis. This was bigger than manipulation and control. This was potentially murder. But proving it would require exhuming bodies, reopening closed cases, convincing police to investigate deaths they'd already ruled on. Sarah's editor pulled her off the story, citing legal concerns. We were on our own again. I knew what I had to do. It was dangerous, possibly illegal, definitely stupid. But Ryan's life was at stake. My child's future was at stake. The cycle had to end. I started planning something I'd never thought myself capable of, a direct confrontation that wouldn't violate the restraining order. The plan was complex. I would position myself somewhere Demi would be, but maintain the legal distance. Lincoln would live stream everything, creating an undeniable record. Sarah would be there as a witness. Other victims would be watching online, ready to corroborate. If Demi approached me, if she violated the restraining order herself, we'd have her. We chose the location carefully. A public park where Demi walked every morning, documented thoroughly on her social media. I would be exactly 501 feet away, technically legal, but visible. The goal was to provoke her into approaching me, to make her break her own carefully constructed narrative. The morning of the confrontation, I was terrified. My hands shook as I set up in the park, measuring the distance precisely with GPS. Lincoln was in position with multiple cameras. Sarah waited nearby with her recorder. The other victims watched through encrypted streams, ready to act. Demi appeared right on schedule, walking with Ryan. He looked terrible, thin, pale, moving like a puppet on strings. She held his arm possessively, guiding him along her usual route. They were about to pass the closest point to my position when she stopped. She saw me. I could tell by the way her body tensed, the way her grip tightened on Ryan's arm. But she was too smart to approach. Instead, she pulled out her phone, probably calling the police. I had minutes before they arrived. This was my only chance. I didn't move, didn't speak, just stood there holding a sign that said, "She did it to me too." Simple, non-threatening, but clear. Ryan looked up, confused. His eyes met mine, and I saw recognition dawn. He'd heard about me, the dangerous ex-husband, but something in my expression must have reached him. Demi tried to pull him away, but he resisted. For the first time, he really looked at her, then back at me. I held up a second sign. "Check your life insurance." His face went pale. He pulled out his phone, ignoring Demi's increasingly frantic attempts to stop him. The police arrived faster than expected. I dropped the signs and put my hands up, not resisting as they checked my ID and the restraining order. I was technically in compliance, 501 feet away, no attempt at contact. But they weren't happy. As they lectured me about the spirit versus the letter of the law, I watched Demi trying to regain control over Ryan. He was backing away from her, phone in hand, his face a mask of horror. He'd found something, seen something that confirmed his worst fears. Demi reached for him, but he jerked away. Their argument was getting louder, drawing attention from other park visitors. Lincoln's cameras captured everything. The police were about to arrest me anyway. They could find some violation if they looked hard enough. But then Sarah stepped forward, identifying herself as a journalist, asking if they were aware they were being filmed. The officers hesitated. Arresting someone on questionable grounds while being recorded by media was a career risk. In that moment of hesitation, Ryan broke free from Demi completely. He ran across the park toward us. Demi followed, screaming about her pregnancy, about his mental health, about the danger he was in. But Ryan didn't stop until he was standing next to me, breathing hard, eyes wild. "She's been drugging me," he gasped out. "I found the pills hidden in her vitamin bottles, the same ones she said she gave you." He looked at the police officers. "I want to press charges. I want a restraining order. I want out." The scene exploded into chaos. Demi arrived, demanding Ryan return with her, claiming he was having an episode. The police tried to separate everyone. Sarah recorded everything. Lincoln streamed it live to dozens of witnesses. And in the middle of it all, Demi's mask finally slipped. "You ungrateful piece of garbage," she snarled at Ryan, her perfect composure cracking. "After everything I've done for you, after I've carried your child, you're going to believe him?" She gestured at me with pure hatred. "He's nothing. A failed programmer who couldn't handle the real world. You'll be nothing without me too." The police officers exchanged glances. This wasn't the calm, collected victim they'd been told about. Sarah stepped closer, her recorder catching every word. Ryan pulled out his phone, showing the officer screenshots of the life insurance policies, the hidden medications, the evidence he'd found in just minutes of looking. But Demi wasn't finished. She clutched her stomach, doubling over. "The baby," she gasped. "The stress. I need an ambulance." It was a masterful performance, but Ryan surprised everyone with his response. "She's not pregnant," he said flatly. "I found the fake ultrasounds in her desk. The same ones she used on him." He pointed at me. "She's been taking hormones to fake symptoms, but there's no baby there. Never was." The paramedics arrived, adding to the chaos. Demi maintained her performance, but the doubt was spreading. The police separated everyone for questioning. I gave my statement carefully, sticking to facts, showing them the restraining order compliance. Ryan was more emotional, pouring out weeks of manipulation and control. Sarah worked her magic with the officers, sharing just enough of her investigation to make them curious. The life insurance policies were particularly interesting to them. Large policies on multiple men, some of whom had died. That was worth looking into. They took Demi in for questioning, though she wasn't under arrest yet. The live stream had gone viral among our network of victims. Men who'd been silent for years saw Demi's mask slip, saw her real face revealed. They started reaching out to Sarah, to the police, to anyone who would listen. The dam was breaking. But Demi had one more card to play. From the police station, she called her lawyer. Not just any lawyer, but a high-powered attorney who specialized in defamation and harassment cases. Within hours, cease and desist letters were flying. Sarah's editor ordered her to stop. Lincoln's live stream was taken down. I was served with papers for violating the spirit of the restraining order. We were back in defensive mode. But something had changed. Ryan was free and angry. He hired his own lawyer, filed his own restraining order, and started documenting everything he remembered. His testimony was current, credible, and corroborated everything we'd claimed. The police couldn't ignore it. The investigation moved slowly but steadily. Financial forensics revealed the pattern of insurance policies. Medical examiners agreed to review the suicided cases. Demi's carefully constructed world was crumbling, but she wasn't going down without a fight. She launched a media campaign of her own, portraying herself as a victim of coordinated harassment by mentally ill ex-partners. She found sympathetic outlets willing to run her story without fact-checking. The narrative war was on, and she had more resources than we did. But we had something she didn't: the truth in growing numbers. Every day, more victims came forward. Men who'd suffered in silence found courage and solidarity. Sarah couldn't publish through traditional channels, but she started a blog, posting evidence and testimonies. It gained traction despite Demi's legal threats. The turning point came when one of the suicided cases was reopened. The medical examiner found inconsistencies in the original report. The The toxicology showed medications that didn't match the prescribed list. The handwriting on the suicide note didn't match other samples. It wasn't proof of murder, but it was enough to keep digging. Demi's lawyer advised her to leave the country. We know because Lincoln intercepted the communications illegally, but we were past caring about rules. She had money stashed offshore, connections in countries without extradition treaties. She could disappear and start over. But her ego wouldn't let her run. She was too invested in her image, her narrative, her control. She doubled down, filing lawsuits against all of us, claiming conspiracy and defamation. She played the pregnant victim to the hilt, even as medical records subpoenaed by Ryan's lawyer showed no evidence of pregnancy. The other victims organized. We created a support network, sharing resources and evidence. Men who'd lost everything found strength in numbers. Some were broken beyond repair, but others were angry and ready to fight. The generational pattern became clear as more stories emerged. Demi's mother had done the same thing to at least 6 men. Her grandmother's count was harder to verify, but seemed even higher. Financial records showed a family fortune built on life insurance payouts and controlling broken men's assets. It was a criminal enterprise spanning decades. Sarah found her angle. Unable to publish through traditional media, she partnered with a documentary filmmaker interested in generational abuse patterns. They started interviewing victims, building a comprehensive narrative that no legal threat could completely suppress. The police investigation expanded. Federal authorities got involved when the insurance fraud crossed state lines. The IRS became interested in the offshore accounts. Multiple agencies were now looking at Demi and her family's activities. The walls were closing in. But Demi had one last manipulation to try. She attempted to reconcile with me, sending messages through intermediaries about forgiveness and moving forward for the baby. When that didn't work, she tried threats. She had evidence of my hacking her accounts, my stalking behavior. She could destroy me if I didn't back off. I was tempted to give in. The legal bills were mounting, the stress was killing me. Living in motels and looking over my shoulder was no life. But then I thought about Ryan, about the other victims, about the child that might or might not exist. The cycle had to end. We coordinated our final push. Sarah's documentary was nearing completion. The police were ready to file charges. Ryan's lawsuit was moving forward. The other victims were prepared to testify. We set a date to go public with everything simultaneously. Demi must have sensed the net closing. She made preparations to run, but her ego demanded one last victory. She scheduled a press conference to announce her pregnancy loss due to harassment and stress. She would destroy us all in the court of public opinion before disappearing. The press conference was her undoing. Confident in her ability to manipulate, she took questions. Sarah was there, along with other journalists who'd been following the story. The questions started soft but grew pointed. Demi handled them with practiced ease until someone asked about the life insurance policies. Her mask slipped for just a moment. A flash of rage before the calm returned. But that moment was caught on camera, spread across social media, analyzed and reanalyzed. People saw what we'd seen, the real Demi beneath the performance. The police moved that night. Demi was arrested on charges of insurance fraud, filing false reports, and conspiracy. The investigation into the deaths was ongoing, but there was enough to hold her. Her lawyer fought for bail, but the flight risk was too high. Ryan testified at the bail hearing. His story, delivered in a shaking voice, painted a picture of escalating control and manipulation. Other victims attended, silent witnesses to the pattern. The judge denied bail. Demi would await trial in custody. But even from jail, she tried to maintain control. She gave interviews, claiming innocence, painting herself as a victim of the patriarchy. Some people believed her. The narrative war continued, even as the legal case built against her. The documentary premiered online, free for anyone to watch. It told the story not just of Demi, but of 3 generations of women who turned manipulation into a family business. The victim count was staggering. The pattern was undeniable. Public opinion began to shift. More evidence emerged during discovery. Demi's journals, seized from her apartment, detailed her plans in her own handwriting. Financial records showed the full scope of the fraud. Medical records confirmed the fake pregnancies, the drugging, the systematic destruction of lives. Her mother was arrested next, pulled from her comfortable retirement, funded by decades of insurance payouts. The investigation into the grandmother was harder. She died years ago, taking many secrets with her. But the pattern was clear, the family tradition exposed. Some victims found closure, others were too broken to care. Mike emerged from treatment to testify, finding strength in finally being believed. James returned from hiding to add his voice. Men who'd suffered in isolation discovered they weren't alone, weren't crazy, weren't the monsters they'd been painted as. The trial date approached. Demi's lawyer tried every trick: mental health defenses, claims of childhood trauma, even attempting to paint her as a victim of her mother's influence. But the evidence was overwhelming. 3 generations of journals, financial records, and broken lives told the real story. I prepared my testimony carefully, not as a vengeful ex-husband, but as a survivor of systematic abuse. I would tell my story clearly, factually, without the emotion Demi would try to provoke. I would speak for all the men who couldn't. The night before the trial, I finally slept peacefully. Not in a motel, but in a small apartment I'd rented under my own name. I had a job again, working remotely for a company that understood my situation. I was rebuilding, slowly but steadily. Demi had taken so much from me: my career, my confidence, my faith in people. But she'd also taught me something valuable. I'd learned to recognize manipulation, to trust my instincts, to fight back against gaslighting. I'd discovered strength I didn't know I had. The support network we'd built continued beyond the legal case. Men who'd been isolated found community. We shared resources, job opportunities, healing strategies. Some found new relationships, cautiously but hopefully. Others focused on rebuilding themselves. All of us carried scars, but we no longer carried them alone. Sarah's investigation had grown beyond Demi into a larger examination of systematic abuse. She'd found similar patterns in other families, other situations. Her work was helping victims everywhere recognize the signs, escape the traps, find their voices. The trial would be Demi's final performance. But this time, the audience knew the truth. The jury would see through the mask. The judge would ignore the manipulation. Justice, delayed but not denied, would finally be served. As I prepared for bed the night before testifying, my phone buzzed with messages from the support group. Words of encouragement, shared strength, reminders that I wasn't alone. Tomorrow, I would face my abuser in court. But tonight, I was free. The cycle was broken. The hunter had failed. The hunted had survived and thrived. 3 generations of manipulation would end with Demi, the last practitioner of a dark family tradition. Her future children, if she ever had any, would grow up free from the poisonous legacy. I looked at the evidence folders one last time: screenshots, recordings, documents that proved I wasn't crazy, wasn't dangerous, wasn't the monster she'd tried to make me. Tomorrow, the world would hear the truth. Tonight, that was enough. The courtroom was packed. I sat in the witness waiting room, my hands steady for the first time in months. Through the door, I could hear the prosecutor outlining the case: 3 generations of systematic abuse, dozens of victims, millions in insurance fraud. The scope was staggering when laid out like that. Lincoln sat across from me, laptop open, monitoring the online reaction. The documentary had exploded overnight. News outlets that had ignored Sarah's investigation were now scrambling to cover the story. Demi's carefully crafted image was crumbling in real time. "You're up," the bailiff said, opening the door. I stood, straightened my tie, and walked into the courtroom. Demi sat at the defense table, wearing a conservative dress, her hair pulled back. She looked smaller somehow, diminished without her usual audience to manipulate. I took the stand and stated my name for the record. The prosecutor started with simple questions about how we met, our early relationship. I kept my answers factual, resisting the urge to editorialize. Let the evidence speak for itself. Then we got to the HR complaints. I explained finding the IP addresses, discovering they came from our home. The prosecutor introduced Lincoln's technical analysis as evidence. Charts and data filled the screens, showing the pattern across both my jobs. Demi's lawyer objected repeatedly, but the judge allowed it. The technical evidence was solid, verified by independent experts. No amount of legal maneuvering could change the digital footprints she'd left behind. The journal entries came next, blown up on the courtroom screens. Demi's own handwriting detailed her plans: the 5-year timeline to make me dependent, the medication research, the life insurance policies. Even jury members who'd seemed sympathetic to her shifted uncomfortably. "Can you identify this handwriting?" the prosecutor asked. "It's my wife's," I said simply. "I lived with it for years." The cross-examination was brutal. Demi's lawyer painted me as bitter, delusional, vindictive. He brought up my mental health struggles, the restraining order, my stalking behavior in the park. But I stayed calm, answered honestly, didn't take the bait. "You violated the restraining order, didn't you?" he pressed. "I maintained the legal distance of 500 feet, I replied. "I held signs. I didn't approach or contact her." "But you intended to provoke a confrontation." "I intended to warn Ryan. He deserved to know what was happening to him." Ryan testified next. His transformation was remarkable, from the broken puppet in the park to an angry, articulate witness. He detailed the drugging, the isolation, the fake pregnancy. He'd kept meticulous records once he'd discovered the truth, and his evidence was damning. The fake ultrasounds were particularly effective. The prosecutor showed them side by side with images from a medical website, identical, downloaded and printed, then presented as proof of pregnancy. Several jury members shook their heads in disgust. Mike took the stand after lunch. He was shaky but determined, describing his own experience from years earlier. The same pattern, the same techniques, the same devastating results. He'd lost his job, his savings, his sanity. Only Demi moving on to me had freed him. Why didn't you report this earlier? The prosecutor asked gently. Who would believe me? Mike replied. She made sure I looked crazy. She had everyone convinced I was dangerous. I was homeless for 2 years. Even I started to believe I was the problem. James testified via video link, too afraid to be in the same room as Demi. His recordings played for the jury, Demi's voice calmly explaining how she would destroy his life, how she'd done it before, how her mother had taught her well. The prosecution brought in expert witnesses, psychologists who explained coercive control, financial investigators who traced the insurance payouts, IT specialists who verified the digital evidence. The case built layer by layer, each piece supporting the next. Then came the bombshell. The prosecutor introduced evidence from the reopened death investigations. 2 men who'd supposedly committed suicide after leaving Demi. Both heavily medicated. Both with large life insurance policies. Both with suicide notes that forensic analysts now said were likely forged. Demi's mother was brought in under guard. She looked like an older version of her daughter. Same calculated eyes, same practiced victim expression. But faced with evidence of her own crimes, she made a calculation. Better to cooperate than face murder charges. She testified about teaching Demi the family business, how her own mother had shown her the techniques, how to choose vulnerable men, how to isolate them, how to make them dependent, how to profit from their destruction. She was matter-of-fact about it, like describing a recipe. It's about control, she explained. Men think they're in charge, but they're easy to manipulate if you know their weaknesses. Find a shy one, a socially awkward one. They're grateful for attention. Then you slowly take over their life. The jury looked horrified. Even Demi's lawyers seemed shaken. This wasn't just abuse. It was a generational system of predation, passed down like a family trait. Demi took the stand in her own defense. She cried on cue, painted herself as a victim of mentally ill men conspiring against her. She claimed the journals were fiction, creative writing exercises. The recordings were taken out of context. The evidence was fabricated. But the prosecutor was ready. She introduced Demi's blog posts, her social media history, her carefully crafted public persona. Then she showed how it contradicted the evidence. Demi claimed she'd never worked in HR, but employment records proved otherwise. She said she'd never met James, but photos showed them together. The mask slipped during cross-examination. When confronted with the forged suicide notes, Demi's composure cracked. They were weak, she snapped. They couldn't handle real life. I had to protect myself financially. They were unstable. All of them. Every man you've been with. The prosecutor pressed. Demi realized her mistake too late. She'd essentially admitted to the pattern. Her lawyer tried to redirect, but the damage was done. The jury had seen the real Demi, just for a moment, and it was enough. Sarah testified about her investigation, presenting it as a case study in systematic abuse. She'd found similar patterns in other families, but none as extensive or documented as this one. 3 generations, dozens of victims, millions in fraud. It was unprecedented. The defense's case was weak. Character witnesses who barely knew Demi, experts who tried to explain away the evidence as coincidence, an attempt to paint her as mentally ill herself, a victim of her upbringing. But the journal entries showed too much planning, too much awareness. Closing arguments took hours. The prosecution laid out the full scope of the conspiracy. The defense made one last attempt to create reasonable doubt, but the evidence was overwhelming, the pattern too clear, the victims too numerous. The jury deliberated for 2 days. We waited in a hotel nearby, the victims' support group together for the first time in person. We shared stories, compared scars, found gallows humor in our shared trauma. Whatever the verdict, we'd found something valuable, each other. When the verdict came, we filed back into the courtroom. Demi sat rigid, her mask firmly in place. Her mother had already pled guilty in exchange for testimony. Now it was Demi's turn to face justice. Guilty, the word rang out. Count after count. Insurance fraud, filing false reports, conspiracy, identity theft. The murder charges would be tried separately, but there was enough here to ensure she'd never destroy another life. Demi didn't react, even as the bailiffs approached with handcuffs. She maintained her composure. But as they led her away, she looked directly at me. The mask dropped completely. Pure rage burned in her eyes. If she could have killed me in that moment, she would have. The sentencing came weeks later. 25 years, with more trials pending. Her mother got 15. The family fortune built on destroyed lives was seized, distributed to victims as restitution. It wouldn't undo the damage, but it was something. Outside the courthouse, the support group gathered. Mike had found a job, was rebuilding slowly. James was in therapy, learning to trust again. Ryan had started a foundation to help male abuse victims, turning his trauma into purpose. This wasn't just my story anymore, it was ours.